Hello, everybody. Yeah, unfortunately, I've been so busy that my tank is currently covered in algae, but I can show you pictures after. So I hope, as you all know, climate change is severely impacting ecosystems across the globe. What is climate change? Essentially, humans are dumping so much carbon into the atmosphere that it's causing a change in global temperatures, and in many cases warming the ocean in areas that it's not usually as warm as it is. For example, off the coast of New Jersey, we saw whale sharks and tiger sharks this summer that are mostly down south, hopefully. So one of the lesser known impacts of climate change has been the effect that it has on coral reefs. What makes corals special is that they host a symbiotic species of algae known as zooxanthellae within their flesh. What those zooxanthellae do is they photosynthesize with light from the sun, which they then transfer to the cells of the coral for food. So if you want to imagine being able to lay out in the sun and you got the equivalent of 2 slices of pizza after a couple hours, it'd be pretty convenient if you ask me. However, these extremely high temperatures are reducing or negatively impacting the photosystem of the corals. The result is a lot of them actually expel the zooxanthellae, which renders them unable to photosynthesize. Now, corals do have another way to eat. So if you look at your hand, this is essentially what a coral polyp would look like. They have tentacles and they're able to capture prey. Now, there is one group of corals called gorgonians or octocorals that are doing especially well as a result of climate change, and we think it may have to do with their feeding mechanism. So essentially, their polyps have feathered tentacles that are better able to capture prey. So what we did to test this, because nobody really fully understands why gorgonians are doing better, is we subjected a group of gorgonians to basically a heat wave. So we raised their temperature over the course of 4 weeks. We tracked their feeding rate or their metabolic rates. We also looked at their polyp morphology. And interestingly enough, what we found was that instead of extending more or making some sort of effort to try to capture more prey, they kind of did the opposite. So as you can see from these pictures, you have a happy coral at its normal temperature, and then you have a shrunk up one. So now we have the curious predicament of trying to figure out exactly what could be going on and how they're surviving better, even though they're closing up in the high temperatures. It's possible that because they're so much better at eating than other species, maybe they just have excess stores. They could be more disease resilient. Nobody really knows, so stay tuned, and hopefully my data analysis will provide a little bit more speculation into that. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much for that presentation. I was intrigued reading about your research, in part because of this impact of the heat wave and perhaps healthier coral than we would have otherwise thought. But it reminded me of my vacation. I love to snorkel. Mm-hmm. And a question that I encountered had to do with the sunscreen that I use and the impact on coral. Has your research suggested any interactions between some of this global warming and some of the chemicals that we are introducing?
If you are diving near a reef, buy coral-safe sunscreen. So there's a lot of chemicals in sunscreens that can have a negative impact. I wouldn't expect for them to necessarily compound with the temperature, but if it's already unhealthy from a high temperature, just dosing it with more chemicals that are going to negatively impact it, not a good time. So yeah, buy coral-safe sunscreen, especially if you're going to be swimming, snorkeling, or diving anywhere near a reef, please.
I actually went sand sunscreen, and my wife yelled at me. I was like, but we don't have any, and I can't find any, so I'm good.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
I just put on long sleeves. And,
yeah, wetsuits are great.
Yeah. Are there other good questions for Michael? Yes?
Did you see any alteration in metabolic rate? Because you speculated that perhaps there's a difference in the way they store chemicals. Did you see any alteration in your metabolic rate compared to your control corals versus your heat wave corals?
So interestingly enough, what it looks like is the answer is no. The only trick is I was only able to measure metabolic rates in healthy tissue, and quite a few of the corals actually did. Not quite a few, I'd say maybe somewhere around 50% did experience necrosis, which is basically tissue death. So what I was measuring was just kind of the healthy tissue that was left on the coral. So this is one of the problems we're going to have to try to look around or look through our statistical analysis to try to break down how we can account for that lost tissue and what it means. But in the healthy tissue, no, it remained about the same.
Thank you.
a more general question for you based on your research. Do you think that coral reef regeneration projects are successful?
You know, it's funny because there is a lot of kind of talk of doomsday scenarios. There are actually patches of coral. There's one called the Coral Triangle in the Indo-Pacific that's actually extremely successful right now, and they are not minding the temperatures. A lot of my research is focused on the Caribbean where things are really bad. Like down in Florida and the Keys where there used to be really huge scale reefs, they're just completely decimated. So I think the trick is going to be, and it's going to be kind of an ethical issue as well, if we can identify species and even potentially genetically modified individuals that are resistant to high temperatures and reintroduce them to allow the reefs to kind of build back, but there's almost no point functionally in reintroducing a bunch of corals if there's going to be another heat wave that's just going to wipe through, unless they're specifically adapted to that high temperature. No problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much.